This video will work through problem 4.2 from Gapenski's Healthcare Finance 6th edition. Okay, in problem 4.2, we're presented with San Mateo Healthcare, which has an equity balance of 1.38 million at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, its equity balance is 1.98 million. And we've got a couple of variations on the nature of San Mateo and what they actually do with their money during the course of the year. Now, if we assume we have an equity balance of 1.38 million, so let's call that beginning equity, 1.38 million, and then we have an ending equity of 1.98 million. We have a change in equity of 1.98 minus 1.38, or 0.6 million, right? So we have to ask, where did this 0.6 million in an equity come from over the course of the year? So part A says, assume San Mateo is a not-for-profit organization. What is the implied net income for the period? So the thing you have to remember about not-for-profits is they have what I talk about in my class as the non-distribution constraint. Right, so they are not-for-profits are when they earn profit, when they have excess of revenue over expenses is how some not-for-profits will write it. When they have profit, though, we'll just stay with calling it profit. When they have profit, they are not allowed to distribute that profit to in the form of dividends to the owners for a couple of reasons. First, they're not allowed to do it. It's not legal. Second, they don't have any owners, right? Because the owners are this vague idea of stakeholders. And so depending on the nature of the not-for-profit, you would assign kind of a kind of amorphous ownership to some group of stakeholders. Taking a hospital, for example, a community hospital that is a not-for-profit hospital is owned in sort of a notional way by the community that it serves, right? But nobody actually has title. Nobody in the community actually has title to the hospital. It's just kind of understood that it's owned by the community. So the hospital is not allowed to distribute its earnings to its owners, in part because it doesn't have any owners. So that means that if they have a profit over the course of the year, they can do the only thing they can do is retain the earnings. And we'll call that retained earnings. So if the alternative that they could do, and we'll get into this in a minute with the other part of the problem, is if they were a for-profit entity, they would be able to pay dividends, right? And so the two things that you can do with a profit at the end of the year, if you're running a corporation, are you can either retain the profits in the form of retained earnings, or you can pay out the profits in the form of dividends. That's it. So you have to do one or the other. And because this is a not-for-profit, you are not allowed to pay dividends, okay? So what this implies, because the equity went up from 1.38 to 1.98, the change in equity of 0.6 million, what this implies is the profit for the year was 0.6 million. Okay, so now we move to part B. So here, now we're going to assume San Mateo is an investor-owned business. So now we're a for-profit entity, which means that they can pay dividends. Right, so the board of directors instead of the board of trustees, right? Board of trustees for a not-for-profit, board of directors for a for-profit. The board of directors gets to make the decision about what to do with the profits, and they can choose to either retain the earnings or pay out dividends. So in this case, in B part 1, assuming zero dividends, what was San Mateo's net income? Well, if they paid no dividends, then it's the same. It's the same net income, even though even though it is a for profit. So we had, with the for profit, we started with 1.38 million, ended with 0.98 million. That must mean we had profits of 0.6 million. Now the underlying numbers are probably different because it's a for profit. They're going to pay taxes, but at the end of the period, the profits must have been 0.6 million. Okay, so no different between A and B part 1. Now, in B part 2, we assume that we're going to pay $200,000 in dividends. Okay, so a better way maybe for me to present this then would be to actually use the statement of changes in equity format. So let's do that for this one now that we're going to get a little more complex. So we have net income or profit is the first line, which we don't know. Then we have what can you do with your net income? You can pay out dividends. And then whatever's left over is retained earnings. That gets added to the beginning equity. And you have at the end your ending equity. All right, so in part 2 of problem B, we assume we're paying out $200,000 in dividends. So let's put that in there. Now we're going to convert these numbers into thousands. Okay. We know that the beginning equity is 1,080,000, and the ending equity is 1,980K. Okay. So in order for this to go from 1.38, whatever retained earnings is, plus 1.38's got to go to 1.98. So we still know that that's going to be, retained earnings is going to be 600,000. So what net income must we have had if we were to subtract off 200,000 and wind up with 600,000? Well, it's fairly straightforward. 600 plus 200 gives us 800,000. Okay. So 800,000 in net income minus 200,000 in dividends paid out would give us retained earnings of 600,000, which then gets added to the beginning equity, and we end the equity at 1.98. So that's part B. Now part C says assume 200,000 in dividends and 300,000 in additional stock sales. What was San Mateo's net income? All right, so new case, but same line items, right? So we're saying 200,000 in dividends. That beginning equity of 1,380, ending equity of 1,980. Actually, I kind of need a new line here. So let me just write in stock sale here. I probably should have just did this. We know we have a stock sale of 300. So the retained earnings then, retained earnings being, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and rewrite this just so it's a little neater. Okay, a little neater now. We know we're paying out dividends of 200,000. We have stock sales of 300,000. So when we add whatever this is plus 300 plus 1.38 has to add up to 1.98. Well, 300 plus 1.38 is 1.68, right? So what do we need to add to 1.68 to get 1.98? Well, that would be another 300. If I had, if I have dividends of 200,000 and then I wind up with retained earnings of 300,000, then I must have had 500,000 in net income. So let's walk this through to make sure we did it right. Net income of 500 minus 200 gives us retained earnings of 300. 300 in retained earnings plus 300 in stock sales gives us 600 new equity, right? Part of the new equity comes from retained earnings. Part of the new equity comes from contributions from owners in the form of purchasing of their purchasing new stock. So 600 plus 1.38 million gets us to that 1.98 million.